Hola, clase. Today we are going to continue learning how to use the subjunctive tense using the acronym WeirdoCat. Today we're going to learn that the T in WeirdoCat stands for time conjunctions, and I'm going to teach you how to decide whether you should use the subjunctive tense or the present tense when you see a time conjunction being used in a sentence. First, you'll need to know some common time conjunctions and what they mean so that you'll be able to spot them in a sentence. So the first one here I have for you is cuando. This one means when. You should recognize this one because we use it in a lot of sentences and even questions. The second one is in cuanto, and I'm going to go ahead and show you the second and third one together because they mean the same thing. So in cuanto and tan pronto como, they both mean as soon as. And then the last one here, hasta que, is until. All right. So these are the time conjunctions that we're going to be studying. And when you see these time conjunctions in a sentence, that will signal to you that the subjunctive might get used after them. All right. Depending on what comes before these time conjunctions. Let's look at the present tense first. So we will always use the present tense when the actions expressed after a time conjunction are habitual or factual. So I've got two different time conjunctions here. We've got cuando and we have tan pronto como. All right. And you can see that the verb after both of these time conjunctions has been conjugated in the present tense. So I want to show you why we chose the present tense for those two verbs. If you read this first sentence, you'll see, ellos siempre visitan a su abuelo cuando van a Mexico. So they always visit their grandmother when they go to Mexico. So they go to Mexico. Is that a habitual or factual statement? Well, if we look at what happened before the time conjunction there, cuando, we'll see the statement ellos siempre. So they always visit their grandmother when they go to Mexico. So we know that they go to Mexico a lot. We know that it's a fact that they have been and that they've probably been a lot of different times. So we're just going to use the present tense because this is a habitual or factual statement. And the next one, todos los lunes ella estudia tan pronto como llega a la biblioteca. So every Monday she studies as soon as she arrives at the library. And again, we're asking, arriving to the library. Does she arrive to the library a lot? Is it a habitual action? Is it a factual action? Well, yes, it is, because we know that she has done this before and that she's actually done it a lot because she's done it every single Monday, todos los lunes. And so we just use the present tense because it's a habitual or factual, action. Now let's look at the present subjunctive. We will use the present subjunctive when the actions expressed after a time conjunction will happen at some future time that is uncertain. So you can see, again, we're using our two of our time conjunctions. So we have cuando, when, and we have tan pronto, como, as soon as. And then we've got our two verbs. We've got vayan and llegue. And you can see that we've already conjugated those two verbs in the subjunctive tense. So let's read these sentences and see if we can figure out why we decided to use the present subjunctive for both of these verbs instead of just the present tense. So the first one there, ellos van a visitar a su abuela cuando vayan a Mexico. So they are going to visit their grandmother when they go to Mexico. So they go to Mexico. Is this a habitual or factual thing? Or is it an action that's going to happen sometime in the future and we're uncertain? Well, if we look at the first part, we're using the future tense in the first part. Van a visitar. They are going to visit their grandmother. So they haven't done it yet. We have no context here to tell us that this is an action that they've repeated lots of different times, or that it's even an action that they've ever done before. So this is pretty subjective, right? This is pretty uncertain. If I tell you I will buy you a gift when I have enough money, you're probably not going to hold your breath, right? Because that when is pretty uncertain. And in this case, too, we're not really sure when they are going to go to Mexico. We just know that when they do decide to go to Mexico, that they are going to visit their grandmother. So that's why we chose to use the subjunctive here for vayan, for ear, and say vayan, because we don't know when this action is going to happen, but it'll happen at some future time, hopefully. In the next sentence, ella va a estudiar tan pronto como llegue a la biblioteca. So, arrive to the library. Is this an action that happened a lot? It's habitual. Or is it an action that will happen at some future time and we're kind of uncertain of when it will happen? Well, let's look at the first part. Ella va a estudiar. So she is going to study. Again, you can see the future tense is being used here. She is going to study as soon as she arrives at the library. So she hasn't arrived at the library yet. We don't know when she'll arrive at the library. We do know that as soon as she does, she'll study. But what if she doesn't? So we're using the subjunctive tense here for the verb llegar, and we're saying llegue because this is an uncertain future action that is yet to happen. All right, so for the rest of this lesson, I just want to look at some examples and show you two very similar sentence structures, but show you how in one case we choose to use the subjunctive tense, and in the other case we choose to use the present tense. And I'm going to try to show you why we made those decisions, and hopefully you'll start to see the pattern. So in the first example here, nosotros siempre llegamos temprano al aeropuerto cuando viajamos. You can see that we use the present tense there for our verb viajamos. So why did we do that? Well, let's read the sentence. We always arrive early to the airport when we travel. Well, I can show you why we did this because we've got siempre here, right? So this is a habitual action, and this is a fact. This is something that we always do. We always arrive early to the airport when we travel. So we use the present tense. The next one, nosotros vamos a llegar temprano al aeropuerto cuando viajemos. Now you can see we used the subjunctive tense here. So why did we do that? Well, let's look back at the first part and we can see that the future tense is being used here. Vamos a llegar. So we are going to arrive early to the airport when we travel. Have we traveled yet? It doesn't sound like it, right? It's going to happen in the future sometime. So we're uncertain when that traveling will take place. And so we need to put it in the subjunctive tense because we've got a lot of things that are dependent, that are out of our control. So they're dependent on other things happening. All right, let's look at two more sentences. So ella llama a la gente de viajes cuando necesita hacer una reservación. And this sentence is saying she calls the travel agent when she needs to make a reservation. Now, we used the present tense here. We changed necesitar to necesita, but why did we do that? If we look at the beginning part there, it says she calls the travel agent. That doesn't really show us that this is a habitual action. You know, we don't see anything like siempre or cada mañana or anything like that. But we can read this and see that it is a fact. It's a statement. She calls the travel agent when she needs to make a reservation. So it's a fact. It's just something that she does. And there's also no evidence here to show us that we should use the subjunctive tense, right? We're not talking about a future action, and there's really no uncertainty. Okay, so this is just a statement about what kind of a person she is or what she usually does. In the second one, though, it's a little bit different. We see it says, ella va a llamar a la gente de viajes cuando necesite hacer una reservación. Now, in this case, we decided to use the subjunctive. And if you look at that sentence, it makes sense that we did that because we used the future tense at the beginning. So we said, va a llamar. She is going to call the travel agent when she needs to make a reservation. So has she needed to make a reservation yet? No. So we're not really making a statement about her because she hasn't done anything yet. If she doesn't end up needing to make a reservation, then she won't end up calling the travel agent. So there's a lot of uncertainty here about this future action, and that's why we chose to use the subjunctive tense instead of the present tense. I hope you're starting to see the pattern here. This sentence here, both of these sentences are very similar to the last two sentences that we just looked at. So the first one is a fact. It's a statement. Tú facturas el equipaje en cuanto llegas al aeropuerto. You check the luggage as soon as you arrive to the airport. It's a fact. It's just a statement about something that you always do. The next one, though, says, tú vas a facturar el equipaje en cuanto llegues al aeropuerto. Here we use the subjunctive because you haven't done this action yet. You are going to check the luggage as soon as you arrive to the airport. So you haven't arrived to the airport yet. If something happens, then that action of arriving to the airport might never happen. And so that's why we use the subjunctive here, right? Our best intentions don't always end up playing out like we thought they were going to. And so it's kind of cool because in Spanish, we have this subjunctive tense to choose whenever we're in a situation where we're not going to hold our breath about uncertain actions in the future that we hope will maybe happen. In the first sentence here, we have Pedro siempre empaca las maletas tan pronto como compra su boleto. I think you can see why we chose the present tense here. Pedro always packs his suitcases as soon as he buys his ticket. So this is a habitual action. It's a fact. And so it makes sense that we would use the present tense. The next sentence there, Pedro va a empacar las maletas tan pronto como compre su boleto. So Pedro is going to pack his suitcases as soon as he buys his ticket. And I think you can see that really whenever you see the future tense before the time conjunction, that is pretty much your clue that you need to use the subjunctive tense. Because whenever we're talking about future actions that haven't happened yet, we need to use this subjunctive because we're uncertain whether or not those future actions will even happen or not like we want them to. Now here I actually deviated a little bit from the other examples that I used because I wanted to show you that you can also compare the past tense, the preterite tense, with the subjunctive. So in the first example there, we have bucearon hasta que anocheció. All right, and so we use the preterite actually for both of our verbs there. Bucearon is in the preterite and anocheció is in the preterite as well. And this sentence is saying they scuba dived until it got dark. All right. And it makes sense that we didn't use the subjunctive here because it's a fact, it's a statement. We actually did go scuba diving in the past until it actually got dark. So both of those actions happened, they're done. There's no uncertainty about it. They already took place. But the next one, bucearán hasta que anochezca. This is uncertain because what did we use? We used the future tense before hasta que, all right? So this one is saying they will scuba dive until it gets dark. So has it got dark yet? No, that it's going to happen in the future sometime. We're not really sure when it will happen. But we know that they are going to scuba dive until it gets dark. Are they scuba diving until it gets dark above the water, below the water? I don't know. It's uncertain. So we're going to use the subjunctive tense here, anochezca, right? It's anochecer ends in CER, so we change the C to a ZC before adding our opposite ending A. We use the subjunctive here. All right, so I hope that you saw the pattern here. Whenever you're talking about habitual actions, you see things like siempre, you're talking about facts, you're always going to use the present tense, or maybe in this case, the preterite tense. And whenever you're talking about future actions, so when you see the future tense being used, then more than likely you're going to use the subjunctive tense after the time conjunction because you're wading into uncertain waters. You're wading into an uncertain future that you can't guarantee. So of course, we'll be practicing a lot more of these sentences so that you'll be ready to use them. Adios.